often do we talk about periods? We don't. It's a taboo, isn't it? I got my first periods when I was 12. I was told to keep it a secret from others, even from my father and brother, as if it were some kind of unspeakable sin. But the worst thing that brought it in my life was the many restrictions that was imposed upon me due to the widespread menstrual myth that we follow in our Indian society even today. I was not allowed to touch or eat pickle. I was not allowed to sit on sofa or other family members' bed. I had to wash my bedsheet after every period, even if it was not stained. I was branded impure and was forbidden from worshipping, becoming part of festivities and social events. And even today, after many years, you will see signboards outside temple denying the entry of menstruating girls and women. And this is not just my story. This is the story of millions of girls in India who suffer in silence due to the widespread menstrual myths. During my work in spreading awareness about menstruation, I have even came across stories where girls have to eat and wash their dishes separately. They are not allowed to take bath during periods, and in some households, they are even secluded from other family members. Such an outlook is humiliating and damages the self-esteem and self-confidence of a young girl in her early formative years. When I started getting my periods, I began with using rags. I used to wash them and reuse it again. Because of shame, I had to hide those rags and store it in a dark, damp, unhygienic place. Due to repeated washing, the rag would become coarse and very unpleasant to use. I would often get rashes using them. I got curious about sanitary napkins after looking at their advertisements on television and wanted to use them. But the question was how to get them. Not because my parents couldn't afford it, but because there was a shame associated with even buying of sanitary napkins. I grew up in a small town where everybody knew everyone. Even today, 88% of girls and women in India use unhygienic ways to manage their cycles. And it is largely because there is a culture of silence around the subject. And because of this, girls are unaware about the hygienic ways to manage their cycles, especially during the time when they have got their first periods. When girls start getting their periods, they are either of 10 or 11 years old. Around this time, they are either in class 6 or 7. But our educational curriculum did not teach girls about their bodies until they are in class 9. Also, the way it is taught in school, it is explained in a purely academic fashion without addressing the practical aspects of menstruation. The biology teacher in my class was a friendly man, and he took great effort to make our lessons seem easy and fun. But when he skipped the chapter on menstruation and asked us to go on our own, it really strengthened my belief that menstruation is really a shameful thing to talk about. Many years later, when I met Tuhin, my perception about the subject changed.
Aditi and I were batchmates pursuing our post-graduation course in 2009. And during our college days, we fell in love with each other. And it was then that I came to know of the inconvenience that Aditi goes through every month due to her periods. And I still wonder how my mother had kept this phenomenon a secret from me and my brother so well that for me, menstruation was just another topic in the biology book. When Aditi told me about the various restrictive customs around menstruation, I was totally shocked at the outlook that our society has towards this essential body process. The first thing that I did was read about menstruation on the internet. I gathered some basic information about menstruation and shared them with Aditi, expecting that she would already know them.
But it turned out that there were many basic facts about menstruation that weren't known to me, even though I was so well educated and had access to many sources of information. I was conditioned to believe that it is all right to be unaware about menstruation and had accepted the social norms around it. It then stuck to us that if we, being so well educated, were so ill informed about menstruation, there would be millions of girls out there who would be ill informed too. And this leaves them vulnerable to unhygienic menstrual practices and also lowering down of their self esteem and self confidence. So, while at college, we took a year-long research project to understand the level of menstrual awareness in young school-going girls in urban and semi-urban area. And as we had expected, most of the girls were ill-informed about periods. Research in various parts in India shows that 3 in every 10 girl does not know about periods when she gets her first period. And in many parts of Rajasthan, 9 out of 10 girls is unaware about periods. While we generally believe that menstrual unawareness and taboo exist only in rural areas and with uneducated people, we found out that it is as much as an urban phenomena as well. During our research, we also found that the menstrual taboo is not the sole reason behind the menstrual unawareness and menstrual myths. In fact, during my interaction with parents and teachers, they all agreed that the girl should be taught about menstruation and periods before she have started getting her cycles. But in the absence of proper educational material, they find it very difficult and very hesitant to talk about it. And the taboo nature of the subject only makes the situation worse. So in the absence of proper source of information, it is the misinformation, misconceptions, and myth that the girls assimilate, and they pass it to their friends, and later even to their daughters. And this is how menstrual myths propagate from one generation to the next unquestioned. Now we have to understand that there is an inherent shame associated with the subject of menstruation that prevents people from talking about it. So we have to come up with proper communication strategies to eliminate this sense of shame away from the subject.
Being communication designers, we took up this challenge upon ourselves. We decided to create educational materials about menstruation with 2 main objectives. One, to eliminate the sense of shame associated with menstruation by portraying it in a positive light. And second, to help young girls learn about menstruation on their own in a fun and interesting way. During our research, we had gathered many interesting stories and experiences around menstruation from young girls. These stories are very powerful in triggering new conversations, in providing information, and in making young girls curious about menstruation. And we wanted to use these stories to teach about menstruation in as much interesting way as possible. We created a comic book about menstruation. This is how it looks like. In this comic book, there are cartoon characters who enact those interesting stories to teach about menstruation. The readers of this book could be those girls who have not started getting their periods and who do not know what menstruation is. Or it could be those girls who have just started getting their periods and who are curious about menstruation, about how to deal with it and how to be prepared for their periods. Or it could be even those girls who have been getting their periods regularly and they know what menstruation is, but they are curious about the various customs that are followed around menstruation. To address each of these 3 different kind of readers, we have 3 main characters in the comic: Pinky, Jia, and Meera. Pinky has not got her periods yet, and she doesn't know what periods are. Through her, the readers get introduced to the concept of menstruation. They get to understand what happens inside the body that leads to menstruation. Jia gets her first period during the narrative of the comic. Through her, the readers come to know what to expect from the first period, how to deal with it, how to manage periods. Meera has been getting her periods, but she also follows many restrictive customs around menstruation. And she is curious about the true facts behind these customs. Through her, the readers come to know of the common menstrual myths that are prevalent in our Indian society, and they also get to debunk these myths by knowing the facts around them. There's a 4th character called Priya Didi. Priya Didi guides Pinky, Jia, and Meera through their process of learning about menstruation in this comic. She is a young doctor, and that adds credibility to what she says. She is friendly and jolly enough for the readers to easily relate to her. But before making this comic book, we wanted to test our approach. So we created a prototype. This prototype is like a huge pamphlet with comic strips in it explaining the bare basic information about menstruation in Hindi language. We tested this prototype among 50 young girls, their parents, and teachers. While making this prototype, we took great care in explaining the subject of menstruation in such a way that it's least objectionable and it's culturally sensitive. Our criteria was very simple, that the readers of this book should not feel ashamed in reading it in the presence of others. And because of this, parents and teachers were comfortable in letting their daughters and students read this book. It was found that not only girls, but sometimes even boys were interested in reading this book. And it showed that comic actually diminished the sense of shame associated with menstruation. It helped parents and teachers overcome their own inhibition and discuss about this topic openly with their daughters and students. It created an environment where menstruation ceased to be a taboo.
In spite of getting a very positive response on our prototype testing, we had to shelve the project due to lack of funds. We graduated from our college and joined jobs in 2 different e-learning companies where we used to create entertaining educational material for professionals and students. While still in job, we uploaded this comic book online to share it with a much wider audience and gauge their reaction. Over time, people started liking the content. Many of them even volunteered for translating it into their own regional languages. And we also started getting requests for the copy of the comic book to be used in menstrual awareness workshop. All these strengthen our belief that an educational comic book would positively impact the lives of millions of girls in India, and it will bring in an attitudinal change towards the subject. But making a comic book and getting it printed is a costly affair. So we first thought that we would start with building an online illustrated guide on menstruation and look at people's reaction. If we get a positive response to it, and then we'll go ahead with it. After 2.5 years in job, we got married and quit our jobs and launched menstrupedia.com. The website has an illustrated guide on menstruation, which explains the basic essential facts about menstruation that every girl should know to take care of her cycle. We have a Q&A forum where people can ask questions and get answers from the community members. And it also helps us to understand that what kind of information are people looking for around the subject. Then we have Menstrupedia's blog, where we publish stories, experiences, tips, and even poems about menstruation. It is a platform where people voice their opinion openly, and these voices are reached out to thousands of people every month. As of now, the website receives 100,000 visitors every month, and the comic prototype that we have created has been used to educate more than 500 girls by different NGOs and individuals to different girls to educate in northern part of India. And we have received many testimonials from all these volunteers, and I would like to share a testimonial with you. This is a testimonial sent to us by Aina Mondkar, who used this comic book to educate young nuns in 2 Buddhist monasteries in Ladakh. And this is what she has to say about the experience of the nuns. To my surprise, they all agreed that until they read the information given in Menstrupedia comic, even they were of the opinion that menstruation is a dirty process, and they wondered why they have to suffer from it on the first place. But after reading the comic book, their views have changed. Now they felt that this was a vital part of womanhood and there is nothing to feel ashamed about it. And this is what she has to say about her own experience of teaching the girls about menstruation. The best part was, while this exercise clarified their ideas, belief, and concepts about menstruation, it also helped me to overcome my innate hesitancy to approach such a sensitive issue in public. I am now confident that I can teach more and more girls across India about the subject. Now we were ready to begin our work on the final comic book. So through a successful crowdfunding campaign, we generated enough funds to develop the comic, get it printed. And we have also gotten it reviewed by an experienced gynecologist for medical accuracies.
So what change does it bring? Parents now have an educational material that they can use to educate their daughters about menstruation without having to rely on schools or on menstrual awareness workshops. This book also helps anyone to conduct a menstrual awareness workshops easily. Small changes, but these small changes will lead to big changes. Our goal is to educate more than 3 million girls in the coming 3 years. And to achieve this goal, we have to reach out to schools, teachers, NGOs, and local bookstores throughout India and help young girls learn about their bodies through this book. We have to reach out to teachers and train them in conducting menstrual awareness workshops using this book. We are starting with a book that's in English language, but by the end of this year, we'll have it translated in Hindi, and by the end of 2015, we'll have it translated in all regional languages.
We dream of a future where menstruation is not a taboo, not a curse, but a welcoming change in a girl's life. And we would like to end this with a small request from all the parents here. Dear parents, if you are ashamed of periods, your daughters would be too. So please be period positive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.